Welcome back to the Lumiose Post, where we talk about all things Pokemon, specifically the Paradox Podcast, where we do deep dive, speculation, long form discussions, all that fun stuff. Today, I want to talk about the newest Pokemon game, or the one that will be coming out, Pokemon Legends ZA. And specifically, what I want to get to the bottom of is whether this game is set in the past, the future, or if it's maybe a mix of the two, and what a game could look like in each of those scenarios. So the only things we know about this game are the title. We know that it is set only in Lumio City. We know that it is supposed to be doing like the urban redevelopment plan of Lumio City, so you will hypothetically be taking part in a complete redesign and reconstruction of the city. And also we do know that it is an action RPG, so much like the past Legends game, there will be, action elements to it. Now, I will say on the urban redevelopment thing too, though, that still doesn't give us a lot on the plot of these games, which I think might be important to figuring out whether this is in the past or the future or whatever. But the reason I say that is because I think this is not the plot, this is the exposition, this is the setting, you know what I mean? In a similar way to, like, in Legends Arceus, you're a member of the Survey Corps. That's not a plot. That's a setting. That's an exposition. That is some background to the character and to the role of the character. But that's not the plot, right? The plot is the distortion rifts, stuff going on with Arceus and the nobles, and, the Diamond and Pearl clans at each other's throats. That's the plot. So you get what I'm saying. Now, I think there's compelling discussions for both past and future. For one, let's look at the past. So obviously, the number one point for the past is that this is a Legends game, and Pokemon Legends Arceus was set in the past. Now, I'm going to be playing devil's advocate throughout this entire thing, because I'll just let you know right now, I don't know if it's the past or the future. I don't even, necessarily lean one way. I hope it's the past, but if you gun to my head, I'd have to say I'm 50-50. I really don't know. But anyways, the issue with this argument of, oh, well, it's a Legends game, Legends Arceus was set in the past, so this is set in the past. The issue with that is that, there's one game to compare it to. That's not a pattern, right? That doesn't give us anything. That is absurd. Especially when Pokemon has shown they like to change things up with each game a little bit, right? Like Scarlet and Violet introduced, it being open world. It gave us some new features like the Let's Go feature, now the Synchro Machine feature. Even if you look back all the way at Gen 2, the first games that came after Gen 1, they introduced breeding and baby Pokemon and, some evolved forms from Pokemon that previously didn't evolve. So you see, they're always breaking the mold. So I feel like we cannot confidently say, well, Legends Arceus is set in the past, so this is set in the past. Maybe this is set in the past, but I'm just saying that's not a great argument. The best argument I've seen for why this is set in the past is that in the 1800s, I don't remember the exact decade, but in the 1800s, Paris did go through a redevelopment phase. Well, since we're getting an urban redevelopment of Lumio City, that obviously fits pretty well, right? Obviously it makes sense that it would be based on that, right? Because there's not really a modern one going on, but even still, I think there's good arguments for the future, and that's what I'll get into now. So for the future, and when I say future too, I mean after X and Y. I don't mean far into the future, where, Paradox Pokemon are from. I don't mean jetpacks and hoverboards. I mean just post X and Y. I'm thinking maybe 5 to 10, maybe a little more years after X and Y. But the best argument for this one is that, the trailer we did see, we saw people walking around wearing what seemed to be modern clothes. People had, baseball caps and stuff on. So that makes sense. There's also the argument that just in general, these blueprints do look very techy, right? They look very futuristic. I don't know how many of y'all have been to Disney World, but if you have in recent years, Test Track, it used to be something different. It used to like have a different look, but now Test Track has this very techy, futuristic, you know, that neon blue lighting look. It invokes vibes of the future, right? And that's definitely something I get from the trailer. I can totally understand that argument. I would say my counterpoint to that argument would be that these are blueprints. So for one, that explains the blue design of them, but also the idea of a blueprint is you're laying out the future, right? You're looking ahead at what things are going to look like. So they're drawing concepts of the future. So drawing people in what we know now as modern clothing, you know, it may just be like an imagination of what the future could look like. You know what I mean? So I don't think it's necessarily indicative of the game. Now I'll tell you, I said gun to my head, I'm 50-50. Honestly, gun to my head, I think we might switch between the two. Genuinely. I mean, first off, let's look at the fact that this game is set only in Lumio City. It would make sense to me that if it's set only in Lumio City, we can switch between like a past and future version of Lumio City. You know, we saw in Legends Arceus, we are actually from the present day, and we, you know, fall back to the past because of Arceus. Perhaps in this game, you can easily explain that with a Kalos mythical, and that is Hoopa. Also, there is the fact that the game is called Legends ZA. Z is for Zygarde. A could be for Arceus. Could be. Or it could even be for a new Pokemon that's going to have time-based powers, and that's why you get sent back in time. That's, you know, purely speculation, of course, but I'm just saying it is possible. There are Pokemon that exist in the Kalos region or could exist in the Kalos region that could do this to us. Now, again, this just makes sense to me, too, that if it's all set in one city, having two different versions of that city kind of explains why it's only set in one city, right? Like, that makes it seem a lot less smaller. Not that I think that that'll be a problem. Plenty of games are set in one city. I recently did a podcast with Jake Steinberg, and he actually said that, you know, and it was beautifully put. I think it's great. He said that we need to divorce the idea of X and Y's Lumio City from our minds, because it's going to be completely different. You're not two variations of that city. The city's going to be more fleshed out. There's going to be more buildings you can go in. There's probably going to be more stuff from Paris, France that's not in there. Like, you know, a lot of people are talking about the Paris catacombs, but that's a podcast for another time. We're specifically talking about this. The reason I think it could be past and future slipping between the two as well is because if you look in the trailer, it doesn't just show these techie blueprints, right? It does show the kind of old style drawing, like that to me kind of invoked sketch artists like from the Renaissance, like Da Vinci, you know. So we could see it even starts in the past, right? And then it goes to the future, and then it goes back to the past, right? Because you have the first little drawing where they're sketching it, then you have the techie little blueprint world, and then when you get the camera shot, it's the little blueprint world, and then it goes back to like the old-timey blueprint world. So two scenarios I could see. We are in the future or present. Like, again, when I say future, I just mean post X and Y, not like Jetsons level future. And we are doing the urban redevelopment plan, and we go back in time to when, like, we'll slip in between two times where they were trying to renovate Lumio City way back in the day. And, you know, we kind of are learning from the past so we don't make the same mistakes in the future. Like, you know, maybe one thing is like in the past they tried to expand the sewers, but they found that like there were Pokemon living in the sewers, and by expanding the sewers they like actually screwed up their habitat or something. So then in the future, when some guy proposes, we should expand the sewers, that's when, you know, because of the past, whoa, actually, this is what happens if we do that. You know, that would be an interesting take on it. Another take I could see, because again, the trailer does start in the past, if this theory is correct. So if that's the case, then you could be in the past. You're in the 1800s redoing Lumio City in the same way that they were redeveloping Paris in the past, and you keep slipping into the future and seeing the consequences of your actions and having to go back and kind of undo them or figure out a way to solve the issue that this change is going to create. Like, for example, you have a guy say, okay, well, we're going to demolish this building. And then you slip into the future and find out that by demolishing that building, a company bought the property and put a factory there that just polluted the city. So you have to kind of then go back and be like, okay, well, what's a different solution? Maybe we, instead of tearing down the building, renovate the building to be an office space or to be even a like Pokemon conservation center. I don't know, those kinds of things. I could see something like that. Again, it's a little hard to estimate when we don't know the plot, right? And then they didn't show us gameplay footage, so we have nothing but a video trailer, like not a game trailer, but like just a cinematic trailer to guess off of. So we have next to nothing to guess off of. Now, if the game is set solely in the past, I do think that we will be, again, seeing it take place during that redevelopment phase of Paris, like around that time frame. I want to say Napoleon was the ruler at the time, but don't quote me on that. So, that'd be cool if we do get to engage with a ruler, right? Like, we obviously, Kalos has heavy themes of rulers past, right? Like, and you meet AZ, but no one is ruling Kalos, at least no one that we meet. So it would be cool to, in this game, like, there is a king or an emperor or whatever, and we are actively interacting with this character, and they're a part of the game, and maybe even they're AZ's descendant or AZ's brother's descendant, whatever. Then in the future, again, I would think that it would be a similar government system to X and Y. So I would think that it's like a democracy or parliamentary or something. It's not, ruled by a monarch or an emperor. But I think it would be cool to explore the past. It's funny, oddly enough, while the future has more potential because we do not know what the future could bring, to me, the past feels like it has the most potential, right? We could also get some explanation, too, on things like longtime fans of the channel will know. I'm obsessed with the Lumiose Ghost Girl. I really want to know what that mystery is. A game set only in Lumiose City is very likely to give us answers to that. I really believe that. But the nice thing about this is that we can, if we're in the future, we could end up being the one she refers to. For those who don't know, the Lumiose Ghost Girl is, you'll go up in this office in Lumiose City, and the game will kind of like freeze up, and the lights will flicker, and this girl will float, not walk, float out and say, no, you're not the one. And then just continue floating into the office. You try to follow her, you won't find her. It's clearly like a ghost. No explanation. Genuinely, there's no explanation in the games for this. People have crafted their theories, obviously, but there is no explanation officially given by the games. So we could see a scenario where we walk through that elevator in, the future or the present, where she walks out and goes, you're the one. And then you get more into her story. Perhaps she has some unfinished business and you help her complete that unfinished business so she can pass on to the afterlife happily. Or we could see a scenario where we're in the past and we meet her before she's a ghost, and maybe that's the thing too, is like, we're the one, and so she is always seeking us out. That's her unfinished business, is us, which is a sad story, because obviously if this is set 200 years in the past, then we're dead by the time of X and Y, so she's searching for someone that she's never going to meet again. But it's still a fun thought. There is also the fact that we could, if we're slipping between the past and the future, it could be both of those scenarios, right? Where we're in the past and we're interacting with her while she's alive, and then we're helping her finish her unfinished business in the future, right? Like we walk through that door and she's like, oh my God, it's been 200 years, but it's you. You're the one. And then you help her in the future, as well as learning about her backstory in the past. I think that's such an interesting idea. Another thing to think about too is doing a time slip between the past and future is very, very relevant to this generation, right? Like, the last games we got, the first games of this generation, were Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and in this we see a lot of time elements, right? We have obviously the Paradox Pokemon and the box legendaries, Koraidon, Miraidon, are the most obvious examples. They are literally some are represented from the past and are supposed to come from another timeline's past, and then some are robotic and very representative of the future and are supposed to come from another timeline's future. The professors' names, Sada and Toro, literally come from pasada, which means past in Spanish, and futuro, which means future in Spanish. So those themes are very heavy. We even see the professor slip in at what I would call a post-credit scene of Scarlet and Violet. They slip from the past to our present and slip back, and you do these timey-wimey stuff with time loops and all this craziness. So I feel like it'd be very fitting of the generation to close the book by having, quite literally, the Scarlet and Violet book, by having you do both, right? Because when I'm picking between Scarlet and Violet, I'm picking between past or I'm picking between future. But when I am playing this game, I'll be slipping between both. So players who played only the past, players who pick Scarlet, will still slip between both. Players who play Violet, future, will slip between both. Now, this is, again, 100% speculation, because to be completely honest with you, these games don't have to tie into Scarlet and Violet, right? Like, what did Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, and Legends Arceus have to do with Kalos? Or, excuse me, with Galar? Not much. The one thing you could make the argument of is, like, you could say that, you know, there's the fact that, like, Laventon was Galarian, but that's hardly a plot element. That's just something about a character. You could also say that both games are about valor, right? Both games are about valor and glory and being a hero in a way. Like, in Galar, you have Zacian and Zamazenta are these protectors of the Galar region, but at some point the royal family has kind of cast them aside and acted like it was them who saved Galar. And, you know, a big part of the game is you learning that's not true. The heroes of Galar were actually these Pokemon. And you kind of, even the post-game part of the game is about you kind of letting the world know it was Zacian and Zamazenta, you know. Then in Legends Arceus, you have a similar thing with Kamado. Came from a village that was burned down. He wants to prevent that from Legends Arceus. He believes you are threatening his plan to do that. And so it's all about him trying to do the right thing, but he has to learn that, you know, being a hero isn't just killing everyone in your path. It's trying to, you know, mediate two sides, right? So maybe we see some small themes like that in this. Again, I think that the time slipping thing, I really think there's something there. I firmly believe that. It's a great way for us to encounter multiple Pokemon too, right? Like, because, oh, well, now in the future, this is a very techie area, so we're going to find wild Pokemon like Rotom and Magnemite. But in the past, this was actually a little quiet, like, village part of France, like, with tons of grass-type Pokemon, because it was very natural. So things like Badoo and Skiddo, you know, again, all speculation. I want to state that I don't actually have any serious stake in this, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not, I feel like, and this is where we get into a different conversation, but I feel like that's the fun thing about a podcast, right? I can rabbit hole. I feel like people want theorists, or maybe theorists want themselves to be adamant, right? Like, they want to be like, this is it, I'm sure of it, just watch, you'll see, it's just like this. I don't like to be like that. I don't know. You don't know. We don't know, you know? So, yeah. But I really think that there's a lot of potential if the game's set in the past. There's a lot of potential if the game's set in the future, but I think the most potential, and I do think the most likely scenario, is slipping between the two. This would also make sense for how Mewtwo is a Pokemon that is a legendary Pokemon in the Kalos region and has its own Mega Evolutions, 2 of them, in fact. So it would seem like Mewtwo would be a part of this game, but depending on when it's set in the past, Mewtwo shouldn't exist. Sure, you can have a Hoopa ring bring it in, but I feel like they'd want to give it its own story, because not only is it a legendary Pokemon, but it's a, you know, a Kalos legendary Pokemon, like, even though it's not from Kalos, you know what I mean, it is in the Kalos Dex, and it's also the Gym 1 legendary. It's, you know, from Pokemon's main bread and butter. It's from their baby, their firstborn, all that stuff, their golden child. So I feel like they're going to want to do a lot more than just, oh, look, Hoopa dropped a Mewtwo out of the sky. Let's catch it. No, they're going to want to give it a plot and it existing in the future, maybe even it coming to the past with you. And so, like, now it's in the past and you have to kind of get it back to the future, right? Like, that could be a really cool element. There's so much potentials with a time slipping effect. Maybe I've just watched too much Loki. I don't know. But yeah, let me know what you think of this. Do you think that Pokemon Legends ZA will be set in the past, the future, both? Like, do you think there'll be a time slipping thing? Or do you think it is literally just like an alternate X and Y? Because that could be an option, right? Like, it could just, like, Team Flare could still be about, Lysander could still be about, and it could just be another version of X and Y in a similar way to how Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee is kind of an alternate version to Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow, right? Like, because they're all the same plot where, you know, Giovanni's the villain, Team Rocket is the bad guy. You have to do the same plots with Team Rocket. You battle them at Silphco, you battle them under the Celadon Game Corner, all of that. So it makes sense that this could also just be an alternate X and Y. Lysander will still be the villain. That's possible. I don't think that's the case. My bet's on time slipping, but again, I'm not married to it. I'd love to hear where you guys are at, so let me know that in the comments below. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss all our future videos. And until next time, I'll see all of you later.